Credit is not necessarily a bad thing because it helps us buy those important things in life, such as homes, cars, our children's education, and so on. But left unchecked, it can become an unbearable burden that can get us into trouble. So what do you do then when you get into trouble? There are a variety of strategies that you can follow, including debt review, and this requires debt counseling. To talk about the challenge of managing debt, I'm joined by the president of the Debt Counsellors Association of South Africa, Mr. Paul Slot. Paul, pleasure to have you with us. Much appreciated.
Nice to be here.
And thank you very much. A lot of South Africans, we are heavily indebted at this time. I've heard a figure of 79% of households and so on. I'm not sure what the figure is, but it is around there, isn't it?
There's about 24 million credit active consumers, of which 10 million are in arrears at this point in time. So the 10 million you probably can divide into three groups. A third is almost just in arrears, or they're about to go in arrears and they can sort themselves out. A third is so badly in arrears they're waiting for legal action. And the middle third is that they're in arrears and they need help, they can't solve it themselves.
Right, and you know, credit is there, we all use it, right? So there's nothing wrong with obtaining credit, am I right? I mean, 24 million.
There's good credit and bad credit.
Okay.
I think good credit is something you can afford, number one. Two, if you buy an asset that will appreciate. And three, if it's something that you do to actually improve your lifestyle, like education. So bad credit is always when you can't afford it. Two, when you actually do something and you buy something that you consume over the short term, but you pay off over the longer term. So if you buy food on credit, that's a bad thing.
Well, then you are in deep trouble when you get to that point, right? But the main thing, much as we've differentiated between good and bad credit, is when you get to a point where you cannot manage it whatsoever and you keep on borrowing more to manage credit, isn't it? You go to the mashonistas, micro-lenders, who get you into deeper trouble.
It's all about how we balance our spending. Because if you take a normal budget, you should be spending about 35% of your income on household items, about 25% on insurance, saving for your retirement, and about 35% on debt repayments every month. Now, if you do the 35, 25, 35, then you're in balance, you're okay. The moment that 35% debt repayment goes higher, then you're starting to get into trouble. Now, that's, I think, where the problem starts.
Okay.
Many can...
So I'm just working it in my mind. So if you earn, let's call it 5,000 rands, right? So you need to budget or estimate that you will spend 2,000 on servicing the debt, something like that?
Yeah, it's about 35%
35% of that, right? Okay, maybe for you and I to work out the numbers easily, let's call it 6,000. So that will be around 2,000.
Yep.
Okay. And then about another 2,000 to pay for...
household expenditure.
Yes, okay. And then...
a little bit less than that to actually save for retirement, to cover your risks.
Okay, and then be left with everyday expenses of around 20% of your income.
Yeah, it's about 5%.
About 5%?
5%. So,
oh, Paul,
so
5%. Who's going to leave only 5% for?
The 35% household includes all your living expenses.
Oh, I see, okay. Now, if the key part of what we're talking about that you must look at is the amount of money you spend on servicing the debt.
Yeah.
Tolerable is up to 35%.
Tolerable is good.
Yes.
So you'd never enter trouble if you're in that stage.
Yes.
If you're getting to 50%, then it's getting very, very heavy, because now you have less money to spend on food and getting to work and pay for risk services and things like that. Now, we've done a survey the other day of 5,500 clients earning an average 15,000 a month. The average spending on debt was 64%. Now, what does that mean?
Yes.
So if somebody paying 64% of the income on debt repayments, they don't have enough money to live. So how do you get out of that problem?
Exactly. I like that formula that you've just mentioned, because for the benefit of our viewers, if you are doing budgeting and you just start with that formula, at least you can balance your books accordingly. So, Paul, where would one start now if you cannot help yourself get out of debt? What do you do?
I think the first thing that you need to do is to find a debt counselor to speak to that you can trust. Debt counsellors need to be registered with the NCR. They have a registration number, so you can check it out. And you can actually see if somebody is a good or debt counsellor by going to their premises and so on. So don't trust your gut unless you have facts to verify that. When you actually sit down with the debt counsellor, he will follow normally the following process. He will actually ask you about your income and your expenditure, and he will actually obtain a credit bureau report to check that you've included all your debt. The first thing that they will do is actually draw up a living budget. In other words, how much money do you need to live? Can you actually come out with a amount? And that includes a little bit of cutting expenses, but it's sufficient for you to live. Once that process is finished, the next step is, okay, now I know how much my living expenses will be, how much is remaining to repay debt. Okay. And that amount is then the starting point to say, is debt review applicable for you, yes or no?
So, under what circumstances would debt review be considered?
Debt review is the only process that I know that will actually help you to repay your debt, where you become debt-free and you are protected.
Yes.
The key is repaying the debt. So debt review will help you if you can actually repay the debt in a reasonable period of time. Debt review is not applicable. It's not a debt forgiveness process. It helps you to repay it, reduce the expenditure, maybe over a little bit longer a period of time. So you have to check if that's viable, yes or no.
But there's something now, Paul, that can sometimes apply when you are in difficulties when it comes to your debt. You find that one creditor who's got heavy, who's let's call them major creditors and have got a strong influence, says to you, write to you and say, you have to pay your debt within a week. And you've got other creditors to still look after. And if you give in to that, right, and then you pay off that one major creditor, then you default on other credit, and that gets you into even deeper trouble. Yeah. So how do you spread then your responsibilities in that situation?
It's very important is that a consumer in that position is normally very stressed because they have received all these phone calls, say pay the money and so on, and whoever shouts the loudest is paid first, and then they're cutting Peter to pay Paul the next month and so on. So what debt review does is say, let's stop. Let's actually see how much you owe at that point in time. And once you've applied for debt review, the consumer is protected. So nobody can phone you or nobody can take legal action against you because you are protected in the process. So debt review, when you apply, they stop the process. They determine how much debt is available. And now they actually take the money that you have available and they spread that with all the credit providers on an equal basis, proportionate to the debt. So they draw up a debt review plan or a repayment plan that include your money. And as long as that repayment is maintained, you remain protected.
Now, does this apply to different types of properties that you may have bought on debt, or not necessarily? I'm asking this question because for people who might have bought vehicles, for instance, they are always threatened with cars being confiscated from themselves, including houses, by the way, even though it might be a short-term problem that a consumer is facing, but will be able to fulfill their obligations going forward.
A debt review has to include all your debt. We had sometimes people apply to say, you can take all my debt, but my house leave out, or that clothing account keep out. You can't do that. You have to include all the debt in the debt review in order to treat all the credit providers fairly and equally.
So now, if you are being threatened by a creditor, what must you do?
There's a formal process that they will take, the credit providers, is that in terms of the National Credit Act, they have to send you what is called a Section 129 notice. When they do that, the best thing is not to ignore it, because this is the last friendly warning that something is about to happen. On receipt of the 129 notice, you have 10 days to go and visit a debt counsellor. And if you do that, you actually remain protected in that process. If you ignore that, the 129 letter, then the credit provider can simply go to court and take a judgment against you.
Okay, but once you go to a debt counsellor, for instance, and then who can deal with your matters, you are protected, and there's no one who then have access or rights to whatever property you may be owning.
Yeah, in terms, absolutely, it protects all the credit agreements that is part of the debt review process. So as long as you stick to the agreement and stick to the repayment plan, you are protected from any legal action. They can't threaten you. They can't take you to court, because you simply say, I'm under debt review and I'm meeting my obligations. And that is very strong. And the National Credit Act is fantastic in that regard, and that it protects the consumer through that process, your vehicle, your home loan, all your assets that you have, and it allows you to repay the debt in that process.
Just a quick one as we conclude. What are the issues we must always keep in mind when we're dealing or managing debt?
I think the most important is that in managing debt is understanding your total spending patterns. So the message that I sent earlier is check the formula, see if it works, yes or no. If you understand your spending patterns, you can start to manage your debt. 95% of people don't have a budget, and that's okay. But what we should be doing is managing our spending patterns and making sure that we have enough money to repay the debt. And if you don't have money to repay the debt, start making plans sooner rather than later.
All right. And of course, the Debt Counsellors Association, you are there to help whoever is in trouble. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Thanks very much. And that's Paul Slot, who is with the Debt Counsellors Association of South Africa. We trust that you found this useful. Please manage your credit, because it's that time of the year when we will be splashing out on things we don't need.